Recent changes to the Canada Summer Jobs Funding Program has created a broad swath of controversy in this country, as the application form now requires organizations to affirm a woman's right to have an abortion. Faith groups have mobilized in protest, saying their religious beliefs keep them from signing the clause. Yet, many are relying on this funding to provide key summer jobs to students. Joining me now to discuss this is award-winning journalist Stephen Maher. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
Now, you wrote an article in Maclean's magazine. You were strongly critical of this move. What concerned you about it?
Well, I think that the roots of it is from the government was concerned that in the past some MPs were directing summer job grants to pro-life groups opposed to abortion, and it was being used for activities that there isn't a consensus in Canadian society on. So there were, there was a concern about that. But I think in trying to stop that, which seems reasonable to me since there are different views on this, they created this thing that almost appears to be a values test. And when a lot of summer camps, church camps, sit down and look at this form, they feel, I think with reason, that they're being asked to essentially deny their own beliefs. And I think it would be easy enough for the government to change that form to give comfort to those faith groups and still make certain that the activities that students are engaged in don't go beyond what most Canadians would feel comfortable with.
Now, you join the 77% of Canadians, and many mainstream journalists who spoke out about this, but more than 3/4 of Canadians are currently in favor of abortion access. So you're not really speaking of this from an ideological perspective, but really more just from what could this start if the government started saying that we all had to agree with them in order to receive funding, whatever that view may be?
Yes, that's what makes me uncomfortable about it. I'm like a lot of people like me, I suppose, I'm in favor of women having access to abortions. I've been convinced years ago by essentially the feminist argument about this. Probably your viewers do not agree with me. And that's Canada. That's fine that we all have different views. The problem is when the federal government appears to be sort of testing those views and trying to get people to agree with them. Now, the government says, that's not what we're doing. All we want to do is make sure that the activities are not inappropriate. But so there's a difference here between what they're saying and what the form says. And I think that it's quite possible that they have basically done this by mistake and they are embarrassed and don't want to look stupid backing down. The other possibility is that, particularly for Liberal voters, they benefit, the party benefits if they periodically remind those women that there are people who might like to create abortion laws or restrict abortion. So that's the sort of darker possibility, is that they're sort of cynically using this as a way to scare women.
But when you're saying, the government doesn't want to back down, and it's embarrassing, I think we could all understand that in one sense, but really, this is a charter issue. This is Section 2 of the charter that's speaking up for freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. So this could actually become a legal issue for the government. That's a little bit more serious than just, I'm too embarrassed to back down, wouldn't you say?
I think so. And I was often critical of the previous government for bringing in legislation, some of their tough on crime legislation with mandatory minimums and so on, that it appeared to me they must have known would run into difficulty at the courts, but because it seemed to be violating long established precedents, and they were doing it wasting money and time on legislation that was inevitably going to end up being challenged and overturned. This is the first example I can think of this government doing something that seems like picking a fight that could end up in courts where they must have advice from people who could tell them, well, it looks like you're on thin ice here legally. Now, there has been a federal court challenge The first test, the faith group that challenged it failed, seeking an interim injunction. But that's just the first battle in a struggle. And it certainly seems to me, and I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I've been covering this kind of thing for a long time, that the faith groups would have an argument which has, as they say as lawyers say, that has color. There's an argument that can make that this does violate Section 2 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is ironic because the government keeps saying that they want the groups to respect the Charter, and in fact they may be violating the Charter in trying to force the groups to respect the Charter.
And you think about, there's innocent victims in this that maybe aren't apparent up front. About 80 faith leaders had signed a letter basically saying that we serve the vulnerable. Like, they obviously spoke to the charter issues, but also we serve some of the most vulnerable in society. And if we don't have access to this funding, a lot of those services are going to stop. I've had people talk to me about their summer camps being canceled at their church. But more than that, so many Canadians are serving those who are experiencing poverty from a religious perspective. And this is many faiths joining together. So, what about those innocent victims as the government does this? I wonder if they've thought through kind of all the way through those consequences.
No, I think not. And I know that you can observe some backbench liberals speaking up and saying they have a problem with this. So there's no question that they're getting blowback. That I strongly believe, I've been covering politics for a long time, and Canadian society is very diverse. There are all kinds of people with all kinds of different views about all sorts of things, and religion is often a fault line for those divisions. And it seems to me that governments of different political stripe should be respectful of the disagreements.
Yes.
We ought to be able to say, well, the people running these Bible camps, we may disagree with them about abortion, but there ought to be a way to prevent that from creating a barrier.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much.
Between a worthy group getting money.
I can't agree more. We do live in a pluralistic society, and we have to find a way to get along. Thanks so much for just speaking up on this and for joining me today to unpack some of the consequences of it.
It's my pleasure.
Bye-bye. If you want to make your voice heard, there are a few ways to do that. You can write to your Member of Parliament expressing your concern, or you can write directly to the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour, the Honourable Patty Hadju at patty.hadju@parl.gc.ca. That's on your screen. And of course, we always ask that you be respectful in your communication. If you want some sample letters, the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada has uploaded a few to its website. You can find more info at evangelicalfellowship.ca.